There's a moment in every rise to power where truth begins to fade, not because it's banned, not because it's silenced, but because no one dares to say it. Not to your face, not in the room, not when you need it most. You don't even notice when it starts. One day a small mistake goes unmentioned, a questionable decision receives applause, a shallow plan gets praised for its boldness, and in that moment, without warning, you've stepped into the most dangerous place a leader can be, surrounded by silence disguised as support. People don't lie to you with words. They lie with omission. They stop telling you when something's wrong. They nod when they should raise concern. And slowly the echo chamber forms, a kingdom of yes men, of smiles, of comfort. You think you're being respected, but really you're being pacified. And the reason is not always cowardice, it's survival. Because when power rises, it casts a shadow. And in that shadow, people learn it's safer to reflect your light than reveal your flaws. Machiavelli understood this. He didn't fear the critics outside the gate. He feared the ones inside the court who no longer told the truth. Because when you stop hearing the truth, you stop making real decisions. You rely on illusions, on rehearsed praise, on filtered data. And that's how leaders lose control, not by being overthrown, but by being misled, one silent day at a time. Ask yourself, when was the last time someone disagreed with you without hesitation? When did someone say, "That's a mistake," and you believed them? When did truth last enter your presence without permission? If you can't remember, you've already lost something far more critical than popularity. You've lost perspective, and once that's gone, all that's left is theater. You speak, they clap. You act, they follow. But no one believes anymore. They're just waiting for the slip, the failure, the storm. And when it comes, they won't warn you, because they were trained to smile through every disaster. Not because they hate you, but because you taught them it was safer to agree. You punished disagreement with coldness, you rewarded flattery with favor, and over time you made truth a dangerous thing to speak. That's not loyalty. That's quiet surrender. A leader doesn't fall because he lacks strategy. He falls because no one around him tells him he's already falling. And by the time he notices, he's alone, surrounded by ghosts of approval, drifting further from reality with every yes. If this message hits something inside you, if you've felt the silence around you growing louder, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with the one person who still dares to tell you the truth. Because the first step to saving power isn't defending it. It's rebuilding the bridge between your throne and the reality beneath it. Power thrives on clarity, and clarity dies when no one speaks. They call them assets. High performers, bright minds, the ones you rely on to solve the problems no one else can touch. But what they don't tell you is this. Talent without loyalty is a slow-burning fuse. You think they admire your leadership. You believe they're here to help you rise. But beneath that polished execution, that quiet efficiency, that charming professionalism, there's often a calculation. Because when a talented person doesn't need you, doesn't fear you, and doesn't owe you anything, they begin to see your power not as something to support, but as something to surpass. These people don't attack you, they outperform you, and they do it so well, so silently, that by the time you notice, everyone is already looking at them. Not you. They're not enemies. Not yet, but they are candidates. Candidates for your place. Machiavelli warned, ambition without loyalty is the most dangerous element in a system. It doesn't scream. It doesn't rebel. It waits. It watches. It studies your flaws with the same focus it once applied to solving your problems. And the moment the foundation shakes, even slightly, it steps forward with a plan already written, with answers already prepared, and no one calls it betrayal. Because on paper it looks like competence, it looks like initiative, but it's not service, it's succession. And the worst part, you trained them. You elevated them. You gave them the tools to grow, but not the ties to stay. And once they no longer need your approval, they stop pretending they do. They remain polite, they remain helpful, but they've already left. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, strategically. And if you're still thinking, that's fine, as long as they're getting results, you've already lost, because results without alignment are preparation for a coup. These people don't just want to win, they want to win without you. And they've already started rehearsing what your replacement sounds like. Not in public, but in meetings, in private chats, in quiet comparisons. If it were me, I would have handled that differently. Honestly, I think we're ready for new leadership. He's a good man, but those aren't complaints, they're rehearsals. And the people around them, they're listening, they're weighing, they're thinking, maybe he's right, because talent is persuasive. Competence commands attention, and once people believe someone else can do your job better, they won't wait for you to fall. They'll help you fall. Softly, politely, respectfully. The fall will look like a promotion, like a strategic transition, like a new chapter. But it's still a fall. Power doesn't survive talent. It survives only loyal talent. And loyalty doesn't mean obedience. It means alignment. It means shared destiny. It means if you rise, I rise, and if you fall, I bleed too. If you don't have that, you don't have a team. You have contenders. So if you're a leader, stop asking, who is the most capable? Start asking, who would still fight for me if I had nothing left? Because those are the only people who won't become your rivals. Everyone else is just a future campaign waiting for the right moment to launch. If this made you see someone differently, someone who's talented, respected, effective, but somehow never seems fully on your side, share this with a friend and subscribe, because power in the wrong hands doesn't explode. It replaces you quietly, with applause. They never leave all at once. Loyal people don't slam doors, they don't make noise, they fade, slowly, quietly, and by the time you realize they're gone, they've already been gone for a long time. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And the reason isn't always betrayal, it's erosion. You didn't lose them because they wanted more. You lost them because you gave them less. Less attention, less appreciation, less trust. You began to assume their loyalty instead of earning it. You stopped asking how they were. You stopped listening. You became so focused on keeping the system running that you forgot who was keeping it running with you. And loyalty, once neglected, doesn't protest. It just stops growing. It stops showing up early. It stops staying late. It stops defending you when you're not in the room. It stops correcting your mistakes gently. It begins to watch, to calculate, and then to detach. Machiavelli warned, no throne is ever lost in one day. It slips, inch by inch, through the hands of those who once held it tight for you. You thought they were still with you because they were still smiling, still delivering, still performing. But what you missed was the shift, from belief to compliance, from heart to habit. And when the storm finally comes, they don't sabotage you, they just don't fight for you, because the fight left them long before they left you. Loyalty, when strong, doesn't need applause, it needs recognition. It needs to know it matters, but when all it gets is silence, or worse, entitlement, it begins to ask a simple question. Why am I still here? And the moment that question goes unanswered for too long, loyalty turns into exit plans. And those exits are quiet, respectful, polite, and final. And when you try to win them back, you'll find something's changed. Not in them, in you. Because once you've taught someone their presence is expected, not appreciated, you can't ask them to unlearn it. They might forgive you, they might even stay, but the loyalty, that's gone. Not because they stopped being loyal people, but because they realized you stopped being someone worth being loyal to. If this reached a truth you've lived or ignored, share it, subscribe, because what leaves you slowly always warns you. The real question is, were you listening? It never starts with a crisis. It starts with a small exception, a little favor, a harmless deviation, one broken rule that no one thinks matters, and it's almost always done for the right reason, to save time, to avoid conflict, to help someone who deserves it. But what leaders forget is this: exceptions aren't just decisions, they're precedents. And precedents are contagious. The moment you let one thing slide, you've just rewritten the rules for everyone else watching. No one sees your intention. They only see what you allow. And what you allow, you encourage. Not with your words, but with your silence. Machiavelli warned, nothing erodes authority faster than selective enforcement. Because the minute people realize the rules aren't absolute, they stop respecting them. Not all at once, but in degrees. First they question, then they test, then they break. And when you call it out, they point back to the first exception and say, "But what about them?" And suddenly, you're not enforcing rules, you're negotiating them. And in that moment, your authority is no longer a structure, it's a debate. And no one fears a debate. Exceptions may feel compassionate, but systems don't run on compassion. They run on clarity, on consistency, on the unspoken belief that some lines are not to be crossed, not even once, because the moment you cross them, you teach everyone around you that the rules bend not when they're broken, but when they're convenient. And convenience is the enemy of discipline. It's how strong cultures rot, how great organizations collapse, not with rage, not with rebellion, but with quiet justifications for cutting corners, one after another, until the entire structure is flexible. And when everything is flexible, nothing holds. Loyalty loosens. Standards drop, performance fades, and no one knows who's truly in charge anymore. You can't fix a system by making exceptions. You fix a system by reinforcing its integrity, by making the right thing harder when it would be easier to do the wrong thing. That's what leadership is. Not permission, but protection. And that protection only works if the people under you believe that no matter how small the rule, it still matters. That even if they're your favorite, even if it would be easier, even if it's only this once, the answer is still no. Not because you don't care, but because you do, enough to keep the line clear. And the standard strong. If this opened your eyes to something you once allowed that you now regret, share it. Because no collapse begins loud. It begins small, and it begins with you. Not everyone who challenges you is wrong, but not everyone who sounds moral is right. Some people don't need weapons to take your power, they just need virtue, or the illusion of it. They don't raise their voices, they don't start fights, they ask questions. Innocent, thoughtful, dangerous questions. Don't you care about the people? Shouldn't we be more compassionate? Isn't there a better way? And slowly, the crowd begins to nod. Because these questions don't need answers, they just need doubt. And once doubt enters the room, authority starts to leave. Not because it's guilty, but because it has to defend itself. And when power has to explain, it begins to lose the very thing that makes it power. Mystery, decisiveness, distance. That's the trick. The people who weaponize morality don't want justice, they want leverage. They use the appearance of goodness to disarm your strength. Because no one wants to be the one who stands against kindness. No one wants to argue against compassion. And so you begin to soften, you hesitate, you second-guess, you hold back. And they gain ground, not by force, but by framing you as the problem. Not evil, just outdated, harsh, cold, unfit for the new values they pretend to represent. And once they win the crowd, they don't need to attack you. The people do it for them. Because no one wants to be on the wrong side of virtue, even if it's fake, especially when it's fake. Machiavelli warned us when morality becomes theater, the stage belongs to liars. Because real ethics are quiet, private, difficult, but fake morality always needs an audience. It needs applause, it needs outrage, and the louder it gets, the more dangerous it becomes. Not because it reveals truth, but because it punishes power. And power, once on the defensive, cannot protect anything. Not stability, not vision, not even itself. So the next time someone wraps their challenge in virtue, listen closely, not to their words, but to their timing, to their audience, to their motive. Are they building something, or just tearing you down in a prettier way? Because good people don't need a stage to be good. They act, they sacrifice, they tell you the truth in private. But if they stand in front of the crowd, dressed in compassion, calling for your correction while smiling at your destruction, understand this: they're not moral, they're just strategic. And if this made you remember someone you once trusted, share this message, because sometimes the softest voices carry the sharpest knives. The ones who scare you aren't the real threat. The loud critic, the visible rebel, the outspoken opponent, they're easy to see, easy to track, easy to manage. The real danger is the one who never speaks, never disagrees, never gives you a reason to question them, because silence isn't always loyalty. Sometimes it's strategy. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the one challenging your authority, it's the one studying it, watching how it moves, calculating where it's weak, and waiting quietly for the moment to step forward. Not as an attacker, but as a replacement. Machiavelli understood this. He feared the quiet ones, because they blend in, they adapt, they agree, until the moment they don't. And by then, it's too late, because the people around you are already listening to them, not out of rebellion, but out of boredom, fatigue, curiosity. The quiet ones don't spark revolts. They absorb attention, and once they have it, they don't give it back. They present themselves as stability, as reason, as calm in the storm. But inside, they're building alliances, narratives, trust, and they're doing it without risk, because while others challenge and get punished, they nod and get promoted. They're not playing the game, they're replacing it. And every time you reward their silence, every time you confuse their agreement for allegiance, you hand them more power. Not openly, but structurally, until they're the one people go to with doubts, with frustrations, with ideas. And slowly the center of gravity shifts, from your leadership to their presence, from your voice to their ear. And when that shift completes, you won't be removed, you'll just be ignored, forgotten, replaced without resistance, because power doesn't always fall. Sometimes it just fades into someone else's hands. So the next time someone always agrees with you, always supports you, never questions, never pushes back, ask yourself, do they believe in me, or are they waiting for me to fall? Because the most dangerous enemy is not the one who attacks, it's the one who listens, smiles, and silently takes your place. Praise feels good. It comforts, it reassures, it gives you the illusion that you're still right, still strong, still untouchable. And that's the danger. Because not all praise is real. Some of it is strategy. Some of it is survival. Some of it is silence wrapped in sweet words. Machiavelli understood this. He feared the flatterer more than the critic, because critics sharpen you, but flatterers soften you. Quietly, slowly. They'll tell you what you want to hear. They mirror your opinions. They echo your strengths, but never your flaws. And so, day by day, you drift. Not into failure, but into fantasy. A world where everything's working, where everyone agrees, where warning signs are called progress and hesitation is called wisdom, and by the time the truth hits, you're shocked. Not because no one saw it coming, but because no one told you. They were too busy clapping, too invested in keeping their place near you, too dependent on your favor to risk telling you what you needed to hear. And you made it that way, because every time you rewarded praise more than honesty, you trained the room to lie to you. Not loudly, but gently. And the softer the lie, the harder it is to recognize. Until one day you wake up, surrounded by echoes, not allies, surrounded by mirrors, not messages, surrounded by applause, but no answers. Because the people who could have helped you avoid the fall were too afraid to interrupt your ascent. That's how flattery kills, not by stabbing you in the back, but by letting you believe you're invincible, right until the moment you're not. If this made you think of someone who always agrees with you, always compliments, never warns, Ask yourself this: are they protecting you, or are they protecting themselves? Because real loyalty doesn't always sound sweet. Sometimes it sounds like disagreement, like discomfort, like truth. And if you can't hear that anymore, it's not because no one's saying, it's because you've built a world where they're afraid to. Betrayal doesn't start with disagreement. It starts with agreement, with the nod, the smile, the "I've got your back." Because betrayal isn't loud, it's quiet. It waits, it blends in, it learns your language, your habits, your weaknesses, and it uses them not to fight you, but to become you. That's the trick. Real betrayal doesn't remove you, it replaces you. Not by force, but by familiarity. By gaining the trust you didn't guard, by saying yes when others said no, by making you believe they were safe. Machiavelli saw this clearly. He knew the greatest threat to power wasn't the enemy outside the gates. It was the friend already inside. Because you watch the enemy, but you trust the friend. You question the critic, but you promote the supporter. And in that trust, you become blind to the shift, to the strategy, to the slow transfer of influence from your hands to theirs. And by the time you notice, it's not treason, it's transition. Everyone else already sees them as the leader, because they were the one who stayed calm, who listened, who nodded, while you fought, while you shouted, while you took the hits. And when the storm passes, people don't remember who stood strongest, they remember who stood safest, and that's who they follow. Not because they're smarter or better, but because betrayal wears the costume of competence, of calm, of loyalty, until it doesn't. If this reminded you of a time you were blindsided, not by your enemy, but by someone you trusted, share it. Because betrayal is only shocking to those who didn't listen. The signs were always there. You just didn't want to believe them. People don't stop respecting you all at once. They stop slowly, quietly, in the small moments you don't notice. When you speak but no one really listens. When you demand but no one really moves. When they nod but don't act. That's how it begins. Not with rebellion, but with detachment. With silent meetings after the meeting. With private jokes that you're no longer part of. With decisions made in hallways, not in your office. And it's not because they hate you. It's because they've stopped believing you matter. Not publicly, but privately. Not out loud, but inside, where respect actually lives. And the worst part? You helped it happen. Every time you ignored feedback. Every time you punished honesty. Every time you confused fear with loyalty. You trained them to hide, to shrink, to pretend. Until one day you look around and realize you're in charge, but you're not leading. You're being tolerated, and tolerance is the last step before abandonment, because no one warns you when respect leaves. It doesn't slam the door, it slips out the back. While you're giving another speech, while you're repeating another slogan, while you're chasing the image of a leader instead of the impact of one, and when you finally feel it, really feel it, it's already gone. Not just their attention, but their belief, their trust, their willingness to follow you into the unknown, because people don't follow power, they follow meaning. And when you lose that, no title can save you. At some point you stop asking who's loyal, who's honest, who's watching, and you start asking something else, something quieter, something harder. Who are you when no one claps anymore? When the room is silent? When the image of leadership fades? When you're no longer feared, no longer flattered, no longer followed? What's left? That's the real test. Because power doesn't last. Applause fades. Loyalty shifts. The titles change. But what remains, what truly lasts, is the thing you built when no one was watching, the integrity you didn't trade, the standards you didn't lower. The silence you didn't break to win the crowd. Machiavelli taught strategy, but even he knew No strategy can save you if you lose yourself in the game. So ask yourself now, not later, not when it's too late. Who are you becoming to survive? What values have you quietly abandoned just to stay in control? What truths have you silenced to avoid conflict? And most importantly, when the illusion ends, when the stage empties, when no one's left to perform for, what will you have left that's real? Because leadership in the end isn't about what you gain, it's about what you refuse to lose. Dignity, integrity, clarity, and maybe, if you've done it right, the quiet respect of a few who still believe in something real. So take a moment. Look around you, not at who agrees or applauds or obeys, but at who tells you the truth, who holds you accountable, who stays when there's nothing left to gain. And ask yourself one final question. Will they still follow you when the lights go out? Because if the answer is no, maybe it's time to stop performing and start leading. If you've stayed with this series until the very end, thank you. Not for agreeing, not for following, but for thinking, for staying, curious, skeptical, and honest enough to listen all the way through. We didn't make this to give you answers. We made it to sharpen your questions, because that's where real change begins, not with a leader, but with a mind that refuses to be silent. So, if something in this journey challenged you, unsettled you, or made you see the world a little differently, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Talk about it. Disagree with it. That's how truth grows. And if you believe the world needs more spaces like this, slow, quiet, thoughtful, subscribe. Stay with us, because we're just getting started. This is PhiloSapiens. Thank you for thinking with us.